Well, a good Thursday to everybody, and hope that this week is going well for you. And with it being Thursday, we are thinking through the Sermon on the Mount. And today we are picking up in Matthew chapter 5. We're going to start in verse 17 at the next thing that is recorded here, that Jesus taught his disciples and the crowds that were around them. And I think this really touches on something that Jesus was going to face in his teaching and miracles and preaching and all that he did. With the so-called Jewish leaders, the scribes and the Pharisees and so on and so forth, that they were going to charge Jesus with going against the law of Moses and trying to destroy the law, and they were trying to find anything they could against Jesus. But Jesus actually says here in verse 17 of Matthew chapter 5, "Do not think that I came to destroy the law or the prophets." Jesus told his disciples and anybody else who was listening, he says, do not think that I came to destroy the law, the prophets, to, as if it was, something bad, something that he was totally just, getting rid of in a negative way. He says here that he did not come to destroy the law. He says, I did not come to destroy, but to fulfill. And there's a difference. There's a difference between destroying something and fulfilling something. There's a difference in destroying the law of Moses and all that the prophets said, and Jesus actually fulfilling the law, accomplishing what we could not on our own. Jesus came and did it for us. But then Jesus went on to tell them, "For assuredly I say to you, until heaven and earth pass away, one jot or one tittle will by no means pass from the law till all is fulfilled." Basically what Jesus said there is, until Jesus fulfilled the law and the prophets, then it was still binding. They were still accountable to the law of Moses. And therefore, verse 19, "Whoever therefore breaks one of the least of these commandments and teaches men so shall be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever does and teaches them, he will be called great in the kingdom of heaven." Jesus was telling them then that the law was still standing, the law of Moses was still binding, and they still had to abide by it. Now, Jesus did come and would eventually fulfill the law, and then the law of Moses would cease to be binding. We would not be under the law of Moses anymore. But until that happened, until Jesus fulfilled the law, they still had, as Jews, to live by it. And Jesus says, if you don't keep the laws and you teach others not to keep it, then you're going to be in trouble with God. But if you do what the law says and you teach what the law says, as Jesus himself did, then you will be blessed. But then there's one more thing that Jesus ties into this, and that's verse 20. He says, "For I say to you that unless your righteousness exceeds the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, you will by no means enter the kingdom of heaven." What did Jesus mean by that? Well, we come to know from reading the gospel accounts that a lot of the scribes and a lot of the Pharisees, a lot of the so-called religious leaders were not abiding by the law of Moses. They were actually adding things, changing things. They were teaching as laws of God, things that were really the traditions of men. They were as hypocritical and sinful as they could be. There were so many things, issues that the scribes and Pharisees had. And Jesus says, don't be like them. Don't be hypocrites like them. If your righteousness does not exceed the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, if you're no better than them, these sinful hypocrites, then you will not enter the kingdom of heaven. Don't be like them. Jesus would later, at one point in the Gospels, tell them, whatever they teach you from the law, that you shall do. But do not do what they actually do, because they don't keep the law. So do what they say from the law, but not as they do in the reality of their life. And so Jesus again tells them he came to fulfill the law, which he did. He finished the law. He fulfilled the law. He paid the price that we could not pay. He did away with the old law, brought in the new covenant the book of Hebrews talks a lot about. But again, there's this lesson against hypocrisy. Even today, even under in the new covenant, is we gotta be careful of hypocrisy. That we're not guilty like the scribes and Pharisees were of, saying one thing but doing another, or adding or taking away from the Word of God. So let's learn from this, and let's be thankful that Jesus came to fulfill the law of Moses, so that we could be freed from the law of Moses and be able to live in the law of Christ today, in the new covenant with Christ. And to God be the glory for that. God bless.